All right, welcome back, guys. I hope you've had a bit of a break. Um, in this chapter, I'll be sharing more about what mental health really is. Sometimes it can be quite hard to look at definitions and have clarity as to where are the boundaries of mental health and how it relates to overall well-being. Hopefully, this particular visual will help illustrate the spectrum of mental health for you. Now, as you can see here, mental health is actually a state of well-being where we are able to cope with the stresses of daily life. One sign of mental health is being able to function well, whether we're a student in school, or we're an employee at work, or even as a parent, a sibling in the scope of a home. And obviously, for each and every one of us, it's also important to us that there's some meaning and purpose in our lives. To know that we are making a very meaningful contribution to others. And the state of our mental health is not just about whether we have a mental health condition or mental illness or not, but rather how we are functioning as a whole on a day-to-day basis. The definition of mental health necessarily needs to look at the full range of what it should mean. On one end of the spectrum, an individual is thriving and growing. When we are on this particular end, we still experience ups and downs of life, of course, but we feel ready to cope with these challenges and we want to be able to take it head on positively. This means that we may still feel a bit upset or frustrated or even disappointed when things are not going well. But we are able to make sense of these emotions in a way that works for each and every one of us. In time, we know we can bounce back, and we also feel comfortable enough with ourselves and the world around us to go out of our comfort zone sometimes when it is necessary for us to learn and to grow. So from there, it's possible for things to shift from a thriving mode to a survival mode. And in this survival mode, you feel like you're struggling, where your own abilities or your own skill sets in handling a particular stressor could be overwhelmed sometimes. There's a breach in terms of your own defenses and your ability to be able to overcome some of these stresses. Past a certain point, it affects you in a significant way to the extent that you're not able to perform your day-to-day tasks. In the context of work, for example, you may find yourself overwhelmed. You're burnt out, you've lost your motivation, and perhaps you're just tired. You're overwhelmed with all that you're going through in life to the extent that you can't function effectively at work even. And then you cross from survival mode into a struggling mode. In the context of home, where there may be a strain in your relationship, to the extent where you're not talking to one another, to the extent where you don't feel even like going home, or even to the extent where any potential interactions that you have with fellow family members end up only in arguments and arguments almost all of the time, that's not a healthy state of affairs. You may actually find yourself in the struggling zone as far as your mental health is concerned. Now we're looking at the last category, and that is the category of crisis. When you're hyper-vigilant to all sorts of stresses. While here in this particular column, it says, it's a clinical disorder in a formal sense, but I would say that the area of crisis is when it is at its most severe, its most persistent, and it's to the extent where you start wondering whether life is worth living or otherwise. You may start doing things that potentially may hurt yourself or others. And this is where you might feel so hopeless that life has no meaning. And that's where definitely and certainly you need immediate help at that point of time. I would caveat though, that you don't have to be in crisis before you seek help. The moment you get a sense that you're struggling or in a survival mode already, you want to avoid slipping into that crisis and make some attempt to seek help rather than deal with it yourself. Get help as early as you can, whether it's from a peer supporter, a professional, or even from your own local community services. So, as far as mental health is concerned, it is a spectrum. It is important that you realize that as an individual, you can move along the spectrum over time, depending on what you're facing at that time in your life. Everyone, and I mean everyone without exception, exists somewhere on the spectrum at any one point of time. And in our role, whether it be as professionals, where I'm at, or for yourself as peer support leaders, it is important that we do our best to take care of ourselves first so that we can thrive, we can do well, and we can meaningfully contribute to people around us.